Let me do one thing. People are walking in the background. It's kind of disconcerting.
We'll hide them. Okay, welcome to Blitzscaling, a startup. I'm joined by Yossi Sheffi. Yossi, you're professor of engineering at MIT, which is already pretty impressive, but you're also the author of 9 books, which I have no idea how you wrote that many books. You've co-founded 5 companies. Your books have been reviewed and recognized by leading publications, including the Financial Times, who selected The Resilient Enterprise, which is one of your books, as one of the best books of the year. This is so impressive. And Yossi, welcome to Blitzscaling.
Thank you very much for having me. Happy to be here.
And your latest book is The Magic Conveyor Belt, Supply Chains, AI, and the Future of Work. There's an Amazon link for that in the description of this video or the audio on the podcast. You can also find a link to Yossi's book if you go to blitzscaling.fm, or all of Yossi's books if you go to blitzscaling.fm/books. But Yossi, where else can people find you?
Well, go to my own website at MIT. It's sheffi.mit.edu. I mean, HTTP if you want, but if you just put sheffi.mit.edu, you'll get me. And just Google me. You'll get enough references. And just getting in touch with me is just sheffi@mit.edu. It's easy email, my last name at mit.edu. So it's easy.
Very fancy sounding email.
Yes, very, very original.
So, okay, you, Yossi, are Israeli, and you went to Technion University, which I know well as the top university in Israel, in Haifa. And yeah, tell us, what were you like as a student when you were, at Technion, and how did, what are the things from that era that influenced you in your career most?
Well, first of all, I had a lot more hair. That's for sure. So I went to the Technion. Technion is it's a different university in the sense that it's not like American university. I didn't live on campus. I left. I was already married. I had a little daughter. I worked throughout the evening. And in Israel also, I was in reserves. As you know, most of the Israeli military is the reserve. And I was in the Israeli Air Force. And I had to go and fly once a week just to keep up, and longer period in the summer. Just work my behind off. Of course, it was full time and more, but I always enjoying working hard, so it was not an issue. I then applied. I studied engineering, civil engineering, but took a lot of mathematics courses, well beyond what was required. And then I applied to one school, to MIT. Said I actually I was in business. I was already in business with my father-in-law and thought about he wanted me to take over his business. And so I said, hey, I'll get to MIT, I'll go. MIT is, if you're an engineer,
it's a place to be.
It's a mystical place. So I got in, I went to MIT. When I got out, I came in 75. I did my master and PhD and graduated in 78. And I had a lot of offers in the United States at the time, but also an offer from MIT to stay as a faculty member. So I decided to, how it is, to see how it goes. Let's try this. About 45 years later, here I am. 46 years later, here I am. So I started my initial appointment was in civil engineering, in the transportation group in civil engineering, and I did a lot of work on urban transportation planning. My first book was on urban transportation urban transportation planning, about network analysis, the mathematics behind urban transportation networks. And I worked at it for a while and published papers and all this, but I got very frustrated because as an engineer, I wanted to see people actually using my idea. And I thought I have a great idea of how to run urban networks and transit. And turns out I pitched it to Boston and New York and Colorado, and nothing doing. Nobody, it's all political. Nobody wanted, I'm exaggerating, but people are not ready to start to use high-level mathematics in order to make decisions. So I said, well, they don't have a profit motive, but trucking companies do. So I started working, actually using the same, to begin with, the same. They developed network model for trucking network, optimizing operational tracking, and it caught like wildfire. I mean, I started a company, I started several companies and around this. And you know, my teaching went very well because I was teaching case studies that I was involved in, not just theoretical case studies somebody else did or invented or all of this. So kind of everything worked together. And in '92, I took over the Center for Transportation Logistics at MIT. At the time, it had a budget of $200,000 a year and had two people beside me. It's now we're now at the budget of $18 million and 200 people. So nice growth and do a lot of new things, a lot of other things. And it became the #1 center in the world. So it's cool.
So I'm really curious. You've been a professor now or working at MIT for 48 years, I think, or a little bit above 48 years. Have you, like what's the biggest, I mean, I'm not 48 years old, so I can't imagine even that the world existed 48 years ago. But you know, how is MIT different then, and how is like teaching engineering, like civil engineering, different then versus now?
I never taught traditional civil engineering. I taught the transportation systems basically and then supply chain management. But there of course changes to technology, changes to, but the biggest change is that MIT, like many other institutions, 50 these years, became a lot more bureaucratic, a lot more laden heavy with non-faculty. I mean, we have the ratio between faculty and non-faculty is now, I think, 4 to 1. What it used to be less than 1 to 1. It's we're very, very slow to react, slow to introduce new stuff. And there's a fundamental difference between my colleagues are doing amazing research and innovative research, but in terms of processes, what MIT does, how difficult it is to do anything new, it became very, very difficult, much more difficult than it was. But this is many institutions that grow. Part of it is because of the legal system in the United States require more lawyers to view anything, but it's way more than that. It's just people became comfortable with MIT was able to raise a lot of money. Money was not an issue, so we grew. We don't grow the faculty, we grow a lot of administration. So it is what it is.
And so when
it's an unfortunate change.
Yeah, when you started these various businesses that it seems like you like co-founded them and had more of like a chairman role, like you were mostly commercializing research that you either had been involved in or were aware of. Is that right?
Yes. Usually, when you say chairman, usually I took a year off, either a sabbatical, a leave of absence, whatever, and kind of start the company basically. And then I hired management and became chairman. You cannot be at MIT full-time and be a line officer, be a CEO or anything like this. So I needed to have a CEO. I needed to have it. So that's what I go. For the most part, it commercialized research at MIT, but not always, because since I had 5 companies, I sold. When you sell one, I sold all of them to bigger companies, and the first thing that they want you is not to compete with them. So you have to do something else. So there were points where there were so many different things that I couldn't do that I went and did at one point work with chemical exchange and things like this. Things kind of tied to what to supply chain management, tied to network and optimization, but in really different area. And so I work in retail, various areas, just to make sure that I don't compete with the people who bought my my company.
Is that like I feel that's like a pretty atypical track for a prof. Like most profs don't do that,
Yes,
at least not serially like you do.
that's very, very fair. And even when they have on the resume they do it, they don't really do it in the sense that companies will consult to a startup and be the chief technology officer by doing 1 day a week or something. It's very different to actually do it. It's an all-consuming full-time job, and so there are very few people. Interestingly, another change in the last 50 years is that let's say 30, 40 years ago, people looked down on people who started companies. I was
Right.
I was hiding it. You go for the money or money grabbing and all this, rather than understanding you make the world a better place by doing things more efficiently. You go for the money and all this. Peter, I guess, but this also changed. Now people who start companies are, I wouldn't say celebrated, but people understand it and look up to this. It's a kosher thing to do. It's okay. It was not okay for 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, I feel I'm 35. Well, I'm going to be 35 in a month. So
Spring chicken.
yeah, I'm still young, but I like when I think back to when I was growing up, I really don't feel that being an entrepreneur was something that, or being doing I do computer science, right? So I'm a software developer, and as you say, like I don't know, like it wasn't, being an entrepreneur is not something, at least I feel, and the people I knew, that was seen as being good, in the 90s, which is a little bit later than what you're describing. And then definitely, at least where I grew up, being a software developer was not cool. Like I would do that like in my room because I thought it was really interesting, but like I wouldn't tell any of my friends.
Yeah, because you were a geek doing this.
Yeah.
And then some geek became multi-billionaires, and people say, "Oh, maybe that's not so bad."
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So you did these, you were like pretty involved with them. Like how did this change your approach to your more academic work, right? So you're teaching, but also you're writing. Like how did being more hands-on, building businesses, enrich or influence how you do your main job, if you think of it as your main job, your
The
academic
right
job?
term is enrich, which you use. As I said before, because I first of all I understood the market, I understood software and what it can, what it cannot do a lot better than people who just read about it in some case study or article and try to regenerate it to repeat it to the students. It's things that a lot of what I taught is things that I did and I do, and also it's really interesting when for my various book, I interview companies, I interview the did, and they take me more seriously in some sense. Then they know my background, and they don't take me as a ivory tower academic. They know that I've been in the trenches. I've done. I felt what they felt, and I fought the fight that they fight. So. So people were more open to me in many cases, gave me data that otherwise would have been hard to get to do my own research, to do my own writing. So yes, these things kind of help each other. And honestly, also when I came to a company, people knew that I'm an MIT professor. Many times open doors. So I think these are a symbiotic relationship. It actually worked. The only problem is, as my wife told me after I sold the fifth company, my wife said, "It's a sixth company or me. That's it. Not going to happen, not going to work together because doing full-time at MIT and running a company and writing books and doing this, it's just we don't live together anymore. So that's it. So since I'm going to celebrate in March our 55th anniversary, 55 years. So obviously I get along with her. So we get along with each
You
other.
had to say yes.
I said yes. There was no question in my mind. I didn't even think about it. I said yes, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I've only been married for 6 years, which is, I guess, for my age, for
Yes,
my generation, that's like pretty long.
yes.
But
Unfortunately,
that's nothing compared. I mean, it's 10% of 55 almost. So
yeah.
that's I can only imagine, like, if I think of my relationship with my wife 6 years ago versus now, it's like totally different. And I can imagine it gets even
Oh,
more different over time.
very, of course, very different. Very different. You have kids, the kids leave home. There are many stages in life that you go through together, and we went through together. But even, to be honest, even in my generation, yeah, look, I was 20, my wife was 19 when we got married, which people don't do today. It's just
Right.
my children would never do it. So it's not. Um, but even with, well over half our friends are divorced or second or third
Yeah.
married, more than half. Uh, they have to realize these are, some of them are the 60th generation, they discover free sex or whatever. And it's just was a different. So a lot of people are not, even among our friends, it's not common.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I realized at some point was that everybody I went to high school with, all of them had parents who were divorced by the
Oh,
time we ended high school.
exactly. That's the age that I'm talking about.
Yeah, there was one person whose parents were not divorced, and well, there are two reasons for that. One is that his father was African, so his mother worked for the United Nations, and they kind of like met. Like he was an actual African, like in Africa. He was also a university professor. Um, and so that was part of it. And then his father also died from cancer.
Oh,
So maybe they didn't have time to get divorced. But everybody that I grew up in Canada, like everybody that was Canadian that I grew up with, they got divorced, which is an amazing thing. So okay, you are like, as you were saying, Israeli,
yes.
and like, do you feel that your experience growing up as an Israeli is, if I understand it, somewhat different from Americans in the sense that at least you graduate high school and you go into the army and you're not immediately going into
Absolutely.
into university. And in when you went into the Israeli army, they had been recently involved in many wars, so I guess it's something you took really seriously. Like, how do you feel that because your kind of trajectory as a prof is quite different from the typical prof, so like how did that experience shape your your trajectory?
Well, let me start by asking maybe a question that you didn't ask. But when I came to this country, there were certain culture shocks for me. I mean, for example, I came from a country that had a woman prime minister running the country for many years, and one of the most
Right.
successful prime minister. I had my mother worked full time, the mothers of all. I came to this country, and women were literally second-rate citizens. This was for me hard to fathom, because you have an image of the United States as advanced, doing the right thing. I look around and say, "Are you kidding me?" The MIT was 7% women when I came. I mean, there's hardly. We had a bus that go to Wellesley to take the men to Wellesley, which was a women college. Um, it was very, very, of course, very, very different today. But the culture shock was that I didn't realize, for example, at the time there was the attitude towards gays, which Israel was
Right.
open. Israel was open. I said, what do you care if somebody's gay? I mean, it doesn't hurt you. No. How religious the country was, I mean, there's a lot of these things were kind of a somewhat negative culture shock, as much as there are a lot of positive things. The first year that we came, we added 20 pounds each because we fell in love with ice cream. So it's
That happened to me too. When I
the ice
first moved to the US, I got fat. I think that's like a very typical
cream
experience.
got really fat because we love the ice cream. But I'm sorry, there's a lot of good things, of course, and I enjoyed MIT and a lot of other things. Um, and the opportunities here are much bigger than Israel. But coming back, I'm trying to remember what you asked for.
Oh
How
yeah, I was asking how like how your experience, like your upbringing, like your early life shaped, you know, your path later on. Like I think the main thing, like that I'm very curious about is like I feel there's just something about, like, I'm Jewish, right? So I know a lot of Israelis and I'm relatively familiar with Israel. And my impression of Israelis is they, at least the people my age, so it might be a different generation, but they tend to like grow up faster and like be less institutionalists, in a sense that, like, you know,
true?
especially Americans, like they tend to, you know, they go through the system and they're rewarded by the system. They're like, you know, babied a
Absolutely,
bit by the system.
absolutely true. That's why, by the way, there are so many startups in Israel. There's so many because you don't go to the just an established company. There were for a while. There have been lots of startups. The Startup Nation, you know, the book and all this. But also, you know, honestly, you're more direct. You're not likely
Yes.
to take a lot of shit from people. That's a technical term that you use at MIT, of course. I mean, it's and just tell it as it is. So it's in my even at MIT, I consider people are some people appreciate directness. Most people are turned off by it. Not that it changed me. It is what it is. But I found out that Americans, for example, that's very un-Israeli. They shy from conflict, and
Yes.
even stupid conflict like that, they always tend to want to agree with each other to create. In Israel, you know, in friends, we sit together, we argue politics, always argue politics, screaming at each other, but then we go out and have a beer. I mean, there's nothing, it's not personal. Here, everything is taken personally, as if I don't agree with you,
Yeah.
if I don't like you, I think less of you. No, I just don't agree with your opinion. I have a different opinion. What's the big deal? It's very hard to do here. It's because people take things personally. They think that an attack on their opinion is attack on them, which is not. As much as attack, but it is, as I said, it is what it is. I'm not shying away. I'm still so. So I'm never going to be the
There's,
person.
I don't know. Do you know this philosopher, Diogenes? I don't know how to pronounce his name. He's a Greek philosopher. And
Diogenes, I think. Okay.
yeah, I know how to pronounce his name in French. That's I did my schooling in French. But anyways, there's this anecdote where he met Alexander the Great. And one of his like principles was always kind of like be direct and say what you mean. And there's like this anecdote where Alexander the Great went to the city that he was in, and he thought that this guy would come and meet him, and he'd hear that Alexander the Great was there, and he'd go and meet him. He didn't go, and then Alexander the Great went to meet him. He like stood, he was like sunbathing, the philosopher, and then Alexander the Great walked in front of him and was like, "Hey, I'm really happy to meet you. Like, what is it that I could do as Alexander the Great to, you know, help you? And like, what can I do? Like, anything you want, I'll do." Because he'd heard of him. And this guy's answer was, "Can you please get out of the sunlight because you're kind of in the way."
Yeah.
It's just like a very kind of like direct.
Yeah.
Anyways, that popped in my mind when you were talking about being direct.
Yeah.
So, okay, you have this new book. Your book is, well, the elements that, you know, I found really interesting was your thinking around, you know, the future of artificial intelligence and how it impacts, you know, various things, like partially the things that you're an expert on, so logistics, but obviously for us in our podcast, it's broader. And
the book towards the end goes beyond.
One of the so we had like a quick 10-minute, I think we went over a bit, but conversation before this to prepare. And when I was thinking like, I'll ask you kind of like a difficult question, or maybe a difficult question, but slightly confrontational, based on like point of disagreement I had, or like an element I was like unsure of. So
we just said I'm Israeli. I like a conflict, so don't worry.
There we go. See, I'm too American now.
Prepare me rather than just throw it out there.
So like, okay, my kind of like challenge is why do you believe that the fact that these technologies exist, that things like these jobs can be automated, why do you believe that they will? And I'll give you an example. I'm right now in a building. There's a 7-Eleven in my building, and that 7-Eleven could run with no employees. I mean, in fact, I've been to a store, I think they banned them in New York, that had, Amazon ran, where you just like walk in, take the thing, walk out, and there are no employees, there's nothing, and you just automatically get charged. Yet, I went to 7-Eleven earlier, and they were employees. And there's this kind of cultural barrier, I guess, so this kind of like unwillingness to change things. And like how, I guess my question to you is like, to what extent do you believe that the things that are now technically possible will actually be implemented versus not in a kind of time frame that's relevant for us as professionals?
Okay, so first of all, it's not quite true. I gave all the reasons why things will not happen anytime fast, and one of the first one is public acceptance, which you kind of allude to. But we'll come back to your question why some things will happen. But some things will, for example, today 787 is actually a drone. It can fly without a pilot.
Right.
How many people will go on a metal tube at 35,000 feet in the air that flies over the ocean without a pilot? The answer is nobody. How many people will feel comfortable when an autonomous truck running at 100 miles per hour behind them on the freeway? We'll see. It's not clear at all. Maybe it will work until the first accident. So who knows? So there are things that are public acceptance issue. There are, and in many cases, government regulation will try to protect jobs. And but to me, at the end of the day, that certain very strong trend. One is technology doesn't stop; it will become better and better and better. Second, at the end, it's economics. The reason that that 7-Eleven doesn't do it yet, because the next similar store, be it a CVS or I don't know what stores in Canada that compete with 7-Eleven, will do it and will cut the prices by 20-30%. So the question is the warm and fuzzy feeling that you get from talking to a human, and I do, like you, I do, is it worth 20 or 30% of the price? So for example, we used to have telephone exchange. It was a very personal and warm and fuzzy service. You call the exchange and you ask for Mr. Smith, and they tell you, oh, I know Mr. Smith just went to the store. He will come back, I'll connect you. And all this. You talk to the exchange operator. They don't exist anymore. Why? Because telephone call used to cost an arm and a leg, and now it's basically free. So it's economics comes into it. Companies, as long as the technology, and it's not the case yet. I mean, the Amazon store to build something like this, outrageously expensive. You know, there are cameras and sensors all over the place, outrageously expensive. So the technology is not there, but we see it already in some area. We see it, for example, in chatbots. You go to, I don't know if they have Dunkin' Donuts in, where are you now?
Well, I live in California, but right now I'm in Bangkok.
Okay. Neither one has a
So
lot of Dunkin' Donuts outlets.
no, but
So
yeah. But I lived in New York, which had a lot of Dunkin'
there's
Donuts,
still
although
Dunkin'
less than
Donuts.
Boston. So
Less than Boston. Boston is just Dunkin' Donut country. But
yes,
if you go to Dunkin' Donut or McDonald's or Burger King or anything, you go to the drive-in window, you order some, you talk to a chatbot, you talk to a large language model. Why does it work and why is it easy to do and why it is done? First of all, it does save people. There's one less guy that says, now, they didn't cut a lot of people. They put more people into service in the front of the store rather than back of the store. But it helped them improve service. It helped them. So there are economic gains in this. Second, it's easy to do. Why is it easy to do? Because the vocabulary is not infinite like people discussion. You're not going to come to the Dunkin' Donut whiskey window and ask, "Is there God?" You're gonna ask, say, "I want sprinklers or glazed donuts." That's about it, and then almond milk in my coffee. So it is manageable. It is not too big. It's easy to do. So more and more companies are doing it. When you talk to customer service and everywhere you talk to a chatbot. So these things are getting in. Thoughtful companies are not just laying off people. Thoughtful companies are reassigning people. And you see it even in supermarkets that have, self-checkout. By the way, the ultimate in simplifying jobs is letting the customer do it. You don't even need to do it. It's so easy the customer can do it. So
well, on that point, and this might be actually like making your point in a certain way. I remember many years ago, I went to Australia, and they had self-checkout in all of the stores because their minimum wage in Australia is like $20. And in Canada, where I lived at the time, there was no self-checkout at the grocery store because the minimum wage was like $10. But in Australia, because it costs twice as much, they just automated all the checkout.
And you know what will drive autonomous trucking now? The new contract with UPS, the new contract, people got a lot of money. And interestingly, they got the contract and UPS is laying off people. I mean, it's so California is raising the minimum wage now to $20, in fact, I think. People will automate. It's just not because the question is not is the technology, but what's the difference? I mean, what do we gain, and can we offer whatever we do at a lower price or better service or whatever? And if we do it, we'll introduce automation. So, to me, some of these things are mindless. The government is doing this, pushing things that without understanding the consequences. Um, we'll see how it works. I wrote an article about the union contract, the fact that the artist and the screenwriter, UPS, as I said, those guys are negotiating the wrong thing. They're still negotiating on a little pay more. They should negotiate about the future. They should negotiate that they'll be upgraded to understand how to work with the new technology. And UPS drivers should learn how to operate remote trucking. When they sit in some air-conditioned room somewhere and run the truck like people run military drones. Okay, you need to know how to do it. There are many new jobs that will be created, and we have to prepare for this. And the unions are short term. They look at, okay, you give me 10%. No, I want 30%. Okay. What I'm saying is, I'm not saying against raising money when you do the job, but understand two things. First of all, the more you raise, the more you give incentive to the company to automate and make you irrelevant. So the most important thing is make sure that you are prepared for the new jobs. You are prepared for the new technology that's coming. That's what should be the number 1, 2, and 3 in the negotiation. Yes, you can negotiate for money and all this, but you should negotiate this, by the way, while you still have power. Because if the change will happen, nobody will listen to you. So once there's autonomous trucking run over the United States, the drivers, leverage will be significantly diminished. So I should do it now. That's my point. And by the way, I should be just fair. Good companies do invest in upgrading capabilities of their good employees. They do. Be it a Walmart or UPS and others, they're investing in. The main problem with this upgrading is all the small mama and papa companies and the small gig workers or independent who will upgrade them. Maybe government in some way.
Yeah, like I think there's a like part of it too. So I had read the article that you're
Oh,
referring
you
to,
did.
and I think the thing that popped into my mind, like when you were talking about being upskill, it's kind of like so essentially as an employer, like I'm an employer, right? Like I hire people, and I know how difficult it is to train people to do something different, right? So if it's like if you're used to driving a truck, to get used to in an office, it's just a really different
with
skill set.
the joystick and some delay, understanding the delay
Yeah.
in it's not just turning the wheel. You turn the joystick and it takes a second until the wheel actually turns. So you have to anticipate it. It's different.
Yeah, like so we in my last business we had a big transition. So it was an AI business. So we started off with just like humans doing a lot of the work, and then we transitioned to being fully automated. And of course, there are a lot of the team that are just like spoofing the AI, right? But also like generally, like our engineers, for example, were mostly supporting the humans who are spoofing the AI, right? Like it was more structured like a service software business than like a real product business. And I think within 2 months of starting that transition, I realized almost nobody in the company was worth keeping. Um, and we laid off everybody and we just rehired from scratch because it was just the cost of just like change management in a business is so hard. And so if you're like when I was reading that article you wrote, I was thinking if I'm UPS, it's so much easier for me to hire an 18-year-old or a 22-year-old and train them than to take my like 55-year-old driver and get them to learn new ways. Like it's just I'm not incentivized to do that unless I have to.
Julian, but that's why I said that the union should negotiate it
Yeah,
now.
exactly.
Because once it happened, they have no leverage. Like once you realize what's going on, the people that work for had no leverage. But if you are, well, you're also not a union shop, but if I'm sure you're not. But if you are a union shop like UPS, at this point you have leverage. You can shut the company down. So now is the time to negotiate it. Now is the time to say long-term job security and investment in education. That's the time to do it. That was exactly my point. That if union have any desire to have job security for the members, and it seems like the most important stuff for them, that is what they should negotiate.
So I'll give you. So I'm really interested in understanding, the types of businesses that I work in. What are the skills that people should be developing? Okay, and I want to give and what are the skills people should be deprioritizing? There's something that I'm thinking of doing or trying to do. I don't know if I can do it, but I definitely believe that it'll be possible to do this, in the next 10 years. Maybe today it's possible, maybe not, I don't know. But so I'm starting a new business, and the kind of like product that I'm building, at least for now, is relatively simple. It's a mobile app. And mobile software development now is very, very easy. And I've actually selected a technology stack that's, made to be like as easy as possible. So for example, there are two programming or two popular frameworks. One's called React, the other one's called Flutter. Flutter is very much easier than React, but it uses like a net new programming language that no one knows. React is harder, like less obvious how you use it, but it uses JavaScript, which developers already know. Right?
Everybody knows how to use.
And I've decided to go with Flutter. And the reason I've decided to go with Flutter, and I'm making other decisions, is that it enables non-developers to do the development work. And there are a lot of what they call software development kits that do a lot of the actual hard stuff. And so what I'm doing for my early team is I'm getting engineers, like non-software engineers, right? So like civil engineers or whatever, like people who have like an engineering mindset but don't know how to program, and who are interested in doing non-technical work. And they have, they're just better at empathizing with customers, right? Like they're good project managers, they're good at doing user interviews. Like that's what I would normally hire them for. And what I'm doing, at least at first, and I'll see if I can do it, is hiring no software developers at all. And then what I'm doing to supplement that is I have the co-founder, the CTO of my last business. He now has like 3 kids and has a job that pays him millions of dollars a year, and like it doesn't make sense for him to start another company with me. But he's essentially like coaching my non-developers, because there are things that you can't figure out. And so it's kind of like the the combination of a kind of like elite level coach with tutorials that are online, with tooling that's super simple, and really key ChatGPT essentially, and like ChatGPT based tooling that enables you to query databases with information. My hypothesis is that is sufficient to enable non-developers with an engineering mindset to build the first 3-4 years of this business, like before you have to like actually scale stuff and do DevOps. Maybe I'm wrong, right? But even if I'm wrong, I will be right in 5 to 10 years, right?
I bet.
And like, what does that mean? Like, if I'm so let's say Spencer, who's a producer, who's on this, who's helping us with this call, he's an MIT student, he's not a software developer. Like, how should he think of the skills that he should value, and what are the things that were important for me to develop and learn, which for him are irrelevant?
Okay. So it's really interesting. I make statements sometimes in conferences, and people ask me when I give talks or talk to boards and stuff. People ask me similar questions: what will happen in the future, and what skills should be valued? And I said, let's start from something special, simple: writing anything, writing a book, writing a paper, writing a brochure. This will be a dead skill. Nobody will need this anymore. So what skill is important? The reading is the important skill. Being able to acquire information in critical way. And Lord knows that I have no idea how to teach critical thinking. I mean, that's something that is hard to teach. I mean, teaching writing is mechanical. You teach critical thinking. Give me a break. That's really important. How do I teach? How do I get my students to do? I'm worried about it. What do I tell my students to do? Similarly, software developers, I think it will be, call it quality control or whatever, being able to understand, okay, ChatGPT or ChatGPT 12 by then wrote this piece of code, and 99 times out of 100 it's correct, but it comes out with weird results. So how do I go in and fix it? How do I go and find out what's wrong? How do I monitor systems? How do I, we have autonomous robots that are running and doing something, but how do I make sure that they are doing the right thing? When do I have to intervene? So all this issue of I don't know what to call it, the critical thinking, quality control, the supervising the autonomous systems and being able to understand what they do, evaluate what they do, fix them when they are wrong, uh, decommission them if they are, if there's no hope, get a new one type of thing. I think this will be a skill that you are in fact testing it real time. You are because there will be some with this. I'm sure it's the simple system that you described with the name. I'm not an app developer, but there's scripts there inside. So the question is, okay, it uses this, that, and where did it go wrong? Why don't I get the result that I expected to get? This will be the engineer of the future. I mean, being able to actually be consumer of this product, and like I tell my students, we had every university had a big debate where you should allow the use of ChatGPT or Bard or whatever to write term papers. And I said, absolutely, do whatever you want. Just you understand that if the paper is wrong, Microsoft doesn't get an F, you get an F. So as long as it's your responsibility, no matter what, it has to make sense, it has to be good, and it has to be correct. And ChatGPT sometimes, does crazy stuff. On occasion, it invents stuff. It hallucinates, as we say. So it really happens. So you have to be responsible for it. So kind of this overall responsibility, which is so, some sense, hard to teach. And we know also that it's a very, very difficult job. Why is it a difficult job? Because if you don't do something day to day, it's very hard to keep sharp. I mean, there are cases when pilots, the famous Northwest pilot that flew 150 miles over Minneapolis into Canadian airspace in both US and Canada, scrambled jets because the pilots were playing on iPads and forgot that the system was so automated that they just didn't pay attention to talk about pilots. Train people as they are for the job, and still, because the system. Look, I was talking to people at Boeing, and they say, airplanes today are really automated. We don't need anything. What we do, we make the pilots do the communication. So they have to communicate every so often. You know why we do it? In order to keep them awake. Today, airplane, we go over certain stuff. They can send the message automatically. They can send text. It's not a problem. All can be automated, but we want the pilot to do it. So they'll have something to do, honestly. Otherwise, they just sit like dummies in the cockpit. So it's to get people involved and anticipate where we're going, where we're coming. It's a tough job just to monitor and be ready to intervene when the time comes.
Like, how does that intersect with or compare to the kind of concept of having good taste, right? Like, kind of like you can imagine, like if you make a movie using AI tools, you would actually not do any of the drawing. Like, let's say you make a Disney animated movie, you wouldn't do any of the drawing yourself, but you'd have to be able to know that this is a good drawing. But there's similar things from let's say what I do, like as a software developer. There's certain like being able to tell that the code is in this way is like simple and elegant versus overly complex. Like it's like it's more a taste than an analytical thing that you can actually explain explicitly.
Depending, in your case, maybe it is. But again, it's a question of, okay, open the code, see what it looks like. You have to be able to read it, not write it, but read it and judge it. That's the critical thinking part. Look, I'm working with a big pharma company. The new drug discovery is now done by basically, it's like large language model. They come up with a lot of nonsense, but once in a while, it gets to the scientists and say, whoa, never thought about that one, about that combination. How can this work? And it goes into testing. And so it's not like the AI itself does, develop new drugs, but it gives ideas. It shows people where to look for things that they maybe didn't think before. So
it's kind of like, it feels like a big part of being good at doing this type of stuff is to be really good at learning things, right? So it's kind of like, because a lot of learning you learn by doing, and then so like you have to be able to learn, let's say, like, what is good code without writing code, right? For example,
it's hard. It's hard, and I always say that we were saying that you understand subjects, any subject, anything that you want, you understand on three levels. The first level, when you take a course in it and it's just reactive, the professor tell you, you read the book. The second level is when you write a book about it. Now you have to cover all angles. Excuse me. The second is when you teach it. The third is when you write a book about it. Because when you teach it, you still have feedback. When you write a book about it, you just send it and you better hope that everything is fine because there's no recourse. So it's you need to understand it on a much higher level, whatever subject it is.
and then finally, like, I think the kind of generic perspective on this is that, like, human to human, empathy type skills will eventually become more valuable. So let's say software developers will be less technical and they have to, like, be more product oriented, which is really like caring about the users.
Understand the customer. Sure.
Is that, like, do you agree with that? And how do you kind of like enrich that, or adjust that to make it more clear?
Look, there are things like talk about empathy, but talk about making sure that the results are not biased. For example, making sure there's equity. There are certain moral, issue that we like to make sure that are there, that are not lost. However, the real answer is I don't know, because I don't know because we now have mechanical therapists. I mean, you talk to therapists, they give you answer, and you talk to a machine, and it simulate what this is like. To me, it's like having sex with a doll rather than a human being. I mean, it's totally artificial and it doesn't make any sense to me. But the problem is that especially in generative AI, we're just at the beginning, and we just don't know how far it will take. So that's why I'm hesitating to make pronouncements, because they're invariably wrong. I think that people. I don't think, for example, in business, people will send some smart contract to China or something, and they'll comment it to come back. Yeah, at the end, somebody will have to fly there. The procurement manager, you'll have to meet with a supplier. They'll have to negotiate like mad for 2 days, and then have dinners and talk about the family and become friends. That's how business is done. So these are some deep cultural ways of living that I think will be very hard or take a long time to change, if ever. And what are they going to replace with? I'm not sure.
It's interesting because I was kind of trying to think of the counter argument to, like, that human skills are useful. And so my last business dedicated, I one of the skills I had to learn to do that was sales.
Yes. The most important.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I had to, like, I spent a lot of time to acquire that skill, and I think it's an important skill. But at least for software sales, like B2B software sales, it's becoming less important. So, like, a lot of the way that businesses buy software now is they go to your website and they try it, like they try it out, and then they decide to buy it or not, right? It's like kind of like a free trial, what people call product-led growth. So there's been, like, I think everyone thought like sales is never going away, but it kind of is. I mean, it's not fully going away, but a lot of the sales jobs, they've been converted into just Zoom calls, and then a lot of a big part of it's just become free trials, and then another big part of it just becomes Zoom calls, which makes each salesperson 10x more efficient.
But I understand, but that's a sale. That's not a contract for a long-term partnership, which are kind of different. So even sales become. I know that I'm working a lot with automotive, and to get Ford or GM or any one of these companies to actually do anything. So sometimes their IT department may be different, but it does sell something to procurement people, to manufacturing people. This is like 1950s, sales process. It's not, even though you're trying to sell a piece of software. I mean, it doesn't matter. They still look at it like you're a vendor and treat you like shit, and then it's a part of the culture. And clearly, some people, especially the explosion of software alternative, got people to realize that they have to have a better way in order to talk to a lot of people and try a lot of stuff just to get more comfortable. And by the way, learning, because what they do on your website when they use the software, they learn. So so they learn from everywhere. So they become more sophisticated buyers at the end of the day. That's not quite the case with the. We try to sell a part, a different seat design to GM. It's a multi-year process. It doesn't happen. There's no going to the website and trying it. Even because these things are bigger. You try to sell a dashboard. It changes the design of the car. So it's even though you just think, I'm just trying to put Apple iOS system in it. No, it's not. It's a lot more than that. So still, it takes more. Maybe my experience in this with this supply chain contracts, which are multi-year, long-term partnerships. Really, it's not buy something and go there. Anyway.
Well, Yossi, this has been super interesting, and I want to be mindful of the fact we have 2 minutes, sure. And then I have to let you jump. So, I think, thank you for your time. Thank you to everybody who tuned in for spending time with us. And you can find Yossi's latest book and a couple, you have so many, so I can't list them all, on our website, blitzscaling.fm/books. And where's the best place again to find you, Yossi?
Amazon. Just go to Amazon. Amazon, look Sheffi or the magic conveyor belt. You'll get all my books, and you'll get them in multiple languages. So just make sure that you choose the right language. All my books were translated all of them to Spanish, almost all of them to Chinese, all of them to Korean, but some of them to Russian, Hungarian, all kind of other languages.
None in Hebrew.
None in Hebrew. The market is too small. None in Hebrew. But Iranian, 2 of my books were in Farsi.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, Yossi, thank you so much. And
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.